the meat of the podcast.
Like, have you ever caught your profile reflection in the mirror?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Look like a gremlin.
Yeah.
This is gonna be a disaster.
Yeah. Yo. This shit feel like I won't ever make it home. Traffic's backed up, I got to get off of this road. Foot on the gas, I swear to God, I'm in my zone.
This is She's in Russia. I'm Lily. I'm in St. Petersburg.
And I'm Smith, and I'm in Brooklyn.
Perfetto. Perfetto. Bella. Nutella. I'm losing all my Italian. My Italian's going down the drain. Okay, anyway, so the topic is basically this conception of the politicized mother figure in Russia. And the way we're going to present it is by doing kind of like a brief overview of the official conception of motherhood during the Soviet Union. Then we're going to tell the story of 3 very tragic events, all of which happened under Putin. And we're going to talk specifically about the role of mothers. And it's not only mothers, but like, I think it's kind of more women in general as they relate.
Yeah, but specifically family women. So like mothers and wives for the most part. And wives who have children or who are also mothers.
Yeah, we're going to try to sort of relate this social conception of motherhood with these specific examples from history of like how mothers participated. How would you say that? Participated politically, or like?
I would say like we want to try to connect the tradition of motherhood and the conception of motherhood in the Soviet Union with like mother-based political engagement today, or like within the past, 2 decades essentially. And by mother-based political engagement, what we mean is like women engaging in some sort of political movement specifically as mothers.
Okay, so to start out, we want to give an overview of the official state conception of motherhood in the Soviet Union. I just wanted to start out by saying that conception changed over time, clearly, over the course of the Soviet Union, but it's basically something that I see as being divided into like 2 main parts. There's like the early Soviet years, like the 20s and 30s. Again, we're talking about the official state conception. So like what is being propagated to people from above rather than like what people are necessarily actually doing. That in the 20s and 30s was pretty dynamic and shifted a lot, but started out from being like, we need to unburden women from childcare and like from the burden of motherhood, and the like woman worker should be relieved of that, and the state should take on a lot of care, basically responsibility. There's that, and then there's a post-war also conception. It's not exactly a shift, it's just like you get this like symbolic motherland layer added from the war. Okay, so at least in the 20s and 30s, like what's being negotiated is this relationship between mother, child, and state, basically. So like the father's kind of like pushed to the periphery, the father figure. It's like he's not exactly needed because the mother worker is supposed to reproduce, first of all. She's still supposed to work, be a laborer, like the ideal communist, right? So a lot of the Soviet Union rhetoric is about building this like Soviet human. Then, yeah, to unburden her, it's the state's responsibility to provide like childcare and what else do they provide? Healthcare, yeah.
Did that also include like domestic things like sewing and doing the laundry and cooking?
No, not necessarily. Maybe in the beginning. So the shift between the 20s and 30s is that the 20s, like this like super idealistic early Soviet years, in terms of the relationship to the mother, the ideal was completely socialized childcare, like entirely. Kids would be like raised communally in like kid camps or whatever. And that just didn't work out. There was a lot of like infant mortality because of just like logistical issues with like breastfeeding and health issues with that.
Sounds bleak.
Yeah. They recruited like homeless people or like homeless women to like breastfeed. In any case, like obviously when like a huge experiment like that starts, it's not like clear why exactly it went wrong. It probably went wrong in a lot of ways. So just sort of for practical reasons, things shifted in the 30s towards like childcare being partially private, like in your own home, and the responsibility of a mother, and partially state. So again, like providing nurseries and, you know, before school age, these like places for your children to be.
While you're at work.
While you're at work, yeah. The other thing about this state-propagated conception is that obviously they need a way to describe all of this. And one of the ways was there's like a journal called Motherhood that basically covered like everything, like health care to like social questions, like more sort of like academic questions to like really practical things. Like the overall relationship to keep in mind during these years, even with the shift to a sort of like private/state childcare mentality, is that still the overall thing is that parents, even the mother, are kind of like mistrusted to raise kids. Like kids should be raised to be like ideal communist beings, meaning that ideally they'd be raised like with special educators and stuff, not just like some random parents.
Not just any schmuck that got pregnant.
Yeah. But then you have all these other things like the relationship to abortion. Like abortion was always like regulated by the state in some way, but in the 20s it was totally like legal, and a lot of people were getting abortions because that was like their main form of birth control.
Yeah, I wonder what the forefront of birth control was at that point. Like, what was American birth control like? I mean, people were wearing condoms, lambskin.
That's like the only thing we know.
Yeah.
They were using lambskin condoms, I believe. Our favorite fact. Yeah. In the 20s, there was even like this, you know, we're all equal and we are just going to be people who, again, as I said, like the state will take care of babies. We're not going to be burdened by this like bourgeois family structure where we like, we're a couple and we live at home and we fight and shit gets bad. And then the kids get psychologically fucked up from that, which is like what we just continue to do.
Yeah. I mean,
It's
but
fun.
because the communal thing, like they're like, oh, well, the babies didn't even get to the point to be psychologically fucked up. They just like died when they were 8 months old. Because some homeless lady wasn't producing enough milk.
But if they, I mean, but like you could try, I mean, I'm not
I know,
I'm not
you
saying
always
we
go
should
back
do
to this
but-
as if like socialized child raising is practical or even necessarily a good thing.
It's not necessarily practical, but it's definitely more like mortality rate would be lower at this point.
Yeah, let's give it a
Yeah.
whirl again.
Shall we? It's the 21st century. But yeah, basically the 30s, the overall characteristics of the 30s is that like there started to be more stringent regulation from the government. So abortion was banned entirely, which sucks because then people were doing like home abortions and dying and stuff.
All right, so I'm curious about this like shift to this like weird idea of the motherland / the mother, and how like the motherland really interrelates with motherhood itself.
I don't know exactly.